On an ordinary afternoon, a young black girl did something so simple, so pure, that it would shake an entire city. With no cameras watching, no crowd to cheer her on, she offered a single sandwich to a man everyone else ignored. An old, tired figure sitting on a cold sidewalk dressed in ragged clothes and worn shoes. To most passers-by, he was just another homeless man, invisible and forgotten. But within 24 hours, flashing lights filled her street, police swarmed her doorstep, and the truth about the man she helped was revealed. He wasn't who anyone thought he was. What followed would expose hidden prejudices, challenge the meaning of kindness, and prove that the smallest gesture can set off a chain reaction no one could have imagined. In the heart of the city, surrounded by tall buildings and crowded sidewalks, lived a young girl named Aaliyah. She was only 12 years old, yet she had already seen enough of life's struggles to understand how hard the world could be. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, while her father, once full of hope, had been beaten down by unfair systems and never-ending bills. Despite the weight her family carried, Aaliyah had something many around her didn't, a heart that refused to turn cold. Every day after school, she would walk past the same corner, where a man sat with his head down. His clothes were torn, his beard unkempt, and his hands trembled from the cold. People hurried by, some crossing the street to avoid him, others throwing disgusted glances his way. To them, he was a burden, a nuisance, someone better forgotten. But to Aaliyah, he was simply a human being. One afternoon, she opened her small lunchbox, pulled out the sandwich her mother had packed, and without hesitation, placed it gently in the man's hands. She didn't expect anything in return. No thanks, no recognition. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done what was right. What she didn't know was that her small act of kindness was about to unravel a story so big, it would reach beyond her family, beyond her neighborhood, and even beyond her city. Because this man was not who he appeared to be. And when the truth came crashing down, it wouldn't just change her life. It would make headlines, divide opinions, and force an entire community to confront the way it treated the most vulnerable among them. The next morning started like any other for Aaliyah. She tied her worn sneakers, packed her school books into her backpack, and gave her mom a tired smile before heading out the door. Nothing seemed unusual. But by the time she came back from school, her neighborhood was buzzing. Police cars lined the street, neighbors huddled in small circles, and flashing lights painted the walls of the aging apartments where she lived. At first, she thought something terrible had happened nearby. She had no idea the commotion was because of her. Earlier that day, the man she had fed, the so-called homeless stranger, had disappeared from his usual corner. In his place stood nothing but a crumpled blanket and an empty cup. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered that he'd been arrested, others said he had finally wandered away. But the truth, when it came, would be stranger than anything they imagined. That evening, just as Aaliyah was finishing her homework, a loud knock rattled the thin wooden door of their apartment. Her mother froze, fear written across her face. Knocks like that usually meant bad news. When she opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood there, hands resting firmly on their belts. Behind them was a sleek black SUV, far different from the police cruisers usually seen in their neighborhood. The officers asked for Aaliyah by name. Her mother's voice shook as she called her daughter to the door. The girl's heart raced, her small frame trembling as she stepped forward. What could she possibly have done? The officers didn't scold her, didn't accuse her, but their presence was heavy, their words careful. They explained that the man she had given her sandwich to wasn't homeless at all. In fact, he was one of the wealthiest men in the city, a reclusive millionaire who had disguised himself to test the compassion of ordinary people. And while most walked past him with indifference, it was Aaliyah, a girl with nothing, who had shown him the purest form of kindness. But the story didn't end there. News cameras were already circling. Someone had leaked what happened, and suddenly Aaliyah's neighborhood was crawling with reporters. Some praised her, calling her an example of hope. Others mocked her, questioning why kindness should be celebrated when poverty still chained her family. Even among neighbors, opinions were divided. Some smiled and said her actions gave them pride. Others muttered bitterly, jealous of the sudden spotlight on a girl they once ignored. Meanwhile, Aaliyah herself felt caught in the storm. She hadn't meant for anyone to notice. She didn't want the attention, the flashing lights, or the strangers crowding her block. All she had done was offer a sandwich. And yet, that single moment had pulled her into a whirlwind much bigger than she could control. And when the millionaire revealed why he had been on that street, dressed in rags, it would spark a confrontation no one was prepared for. One that would expose not only generosity but also the ugly truths of judgment, prejudice, and the way society decides who is seen and who is forgotten. The following day, the neighborhood gathered in disbelief as sleek black cars rolled into the street. Men in suits stepped out first, followed by the same officers who had visited Aaliyah's home. Then, from the largest vehicle, emerged the very man she had once seen sitting on a cold sidewalk, his face hidden beneath a tattered hood. But now, he was almost unrecognizable, his hair groomed, his suit tailored, his presence commanding. Cameras flashed as people gasped. The homeless man was no stranger. He was a well-known millionaire, a man whose name had appeared in business, magazines whose fortune reached places people like Aaliyah could barely imagine. The crowd buzzed with confusion. Why would someone like him disguise himself, placing himself among the forgotten? The millionaire raised his hand, silencing the murmurs, and then his voice, steady and powerful, cut through the air. He explained how he had been searching, not for profit, not for publicity, but for kindness. He wanted to see whether compassion still lived in the hearts of ordinary people. Day after day, he had been ignored, shunned, even insulted. But then, one little girl with nothing to spare had given away the only meal she had. As his words echoed, all eyes turned to Aaliyah. Standing small among the crowd, clutching her mother's hand, she suddenly became the center of every gaze. Reporters pressed forward, microphones stretched toward her, neighbors whispered her name. She could feel the weight of judgment, the envy in some eyes, the admiration in others. The millionaire then did something no one expected. He pointed directly to Aaliyah and declared that her single act of kindness had restored his faith in humanity. But more than that, he vowed to repay her in a way no one in that street would ever forget. Gasps erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. The police officers, once intimidating, now stood as protectors, ensuring the moment remained focused. The air was thick with disbelief and tension. Was this real? Could one sandwich truly lead to such a life-altering moment? For Aaliyah and her mother, this wasn't just shocking, it was overwhelming. In the span of just 2 days, their lives had shifted from quiet struggle to standing at the center of a storm that demanded everyone's attention. The world was about to witness what true generosity looked like, not from the millionaire, but from the little girl who reminded him of humanity itself. The street was silent, the crowd waiting for what the millionaire would say next, and then with deliberate calm he walked straight to Aaliyah. He bent down so his eyes met hers, not with pity, but with respect. He said that in a world overflowing with wealth, power, and ego, it was a 12-year-old girl with nothing to her name who had taught him the most valuable lesson of all. True wealth lies in the kindness you give away. In front of neighbors, reporters, and cameras, he announced that he would cover Aaliyah's education all the way through college. Gasps rippled through the crowd. For a girl whose family barely managed rent, this was more than a gift. It was a future rewritten. But he didn't stop there. He revealed that he would also invest in community programs to support struggling families like hers, because Aaliyah had shown him what really mattered: lifting others up. Her mother broke down in tears, covering her face with her hands, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief. Neighbors shifted uneasily. Some cheered, realizing this moment would put their community on the map for something extraordinary. Others whispered bitterly, their envy rising. How could a girl so poor, so ordinary, be chosen for such greatness? But deep down, even the most skeptical couldn't deny the truth of what they'd seen. For Aaliyah, The change wasn't about money or attention. It was about knowing that her small act of compassion, an act most people would overlook, had the power to shift an entire man's heart and set off ripples that would reach far beyond her block. She had reminded the world that humanity is not measured by wealth, skin color, or status, but by the choices we make when no one is watching. The police cars pulled away, the reporters eventually packed up their gear, and the crowd dispersed. Yet the story didn't fade. It spread, first through the neighborhood, then across the city, and soon across the country. Headlines called it a story of hope. Social media turned her into a symbol of kindness. And quietly in the hearts of many who heard it, the question lingered. If a little girl with so little could give so much, what excuse do the rest of us have? In the end, it wasn't the millionaire who changed the world that day. It was Aliyah, a child who saw past appearances, who acted not out of judgment but out of love. And perhaps that's the message meant for all of us. Greatness is not about what we keep, but about what we choose to give away. So ask yourself, when faced with someone society ignores, will you walk past or will you stop and see the humanity right in front of you?